Great. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webcast, The Time Value of Energy Efficiency. My name is Steve Fine with ICF, and I'll be the moderator for this session. This topic is near and dear to my heart as we're working with several of our utility clients to develop flexible load management offerings to help them engage customers and dynamically manage and shape load. We'll start this webcast with a few housekeeping announcements and then quickly move on to our presenters, followed by Q&A if time allows. We'll also be having a Zoom session following this main session, so hopefully you can join us for that as well. First and foremost, thank you to all of our sponsors and ally members for their support of the Energy Efficiency and Resource Conference and ACEEE. Attendees, so you all, are in listen-only mode. Please use the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions of the presenters. As moderator, I'll be sharing your questions with the presenters following the presentations if time allows. So we'll go through we have three great presenters. We'll be going through all three presentations sequentially, and then, but ask your questions as we go along the way. We'll note them in the chat, and we'll get to them as time allows again at the end of the session, or we can bleed over into that Zoom session that'll occur after this one. We'll watch for the Zoom link for that session to be posted in the chat during this session or downloaded in the resources section. Please do refrain from using the chat for any dialogue other than asking questions of our panelists. If there is an attendee you would like to connect with, please use the attendee link on the left-hand side of the column or left-hand side column of the platform. All registrants are listed alphabetically. Also on the left-hand side, you can find a resources section. The resources contain a copy of the program in a PDF format, an attendee list for downloading, Zoom links for all the chats and discussions, such as the one I mentioned, and an evaluation form that we ask everyone to complete after they view their last session. Anyone who completes the evaluation and includes their name and a testimonial will receive a $25 discount to attend the 2023 National Conference on Energy Efficiency as a Resource in Philadelphia, so please do that. All presentations will be available for on-demand viewing within a few days of this engagement hub. Presenters' PowerPoints can be found on their page in the program participants section. So a lot of details. I'm sure those will all be repeated. And now I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel of speakers. We really do have an exceptional lineup today. They are Sean Murphy of Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, LBNL, Jeremy Peterson with Xcel Energy, and Abigail Dakin with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So without further ado, we'll start with our first speaker, who's Sean Murphy, as we said, with LBNL. And Sean's presentation is entitled Time to Save, the Added Value of Accounting for Hourly Incidents of Electricity Savings from Residential Space Conditioning Measures, plus the time-sensitive value of energy efficiency calculators. So this is, I think, a really informative presentation and really talk to us about sort of the nuts and bolts of how this is being measured, a little bit about how it's being valued. So good stuff. I'll just mention that Sean is a scientific engineering associate in the Electricity Markets and Policy Department at LBNL. Sean's research focuses on utility administered energy efficiency programs and energy efficiency financing. And Sean holds a BS in environmental engineering from the Johns Hopkins University and is currently pursuing a Master of Public Policy from the Golden School of Public Policy at the University of California, Berkeley. And I would just note that we switched it up. So I did my undergrad at the University of California. I did my master's degree at Johns Hopkins. Sean ended up in California, I ended up in Maryland. So anyway, Sean, the floor is all yours. Please take it away. So we're having a bit of trouble hearing Sean. If we don't get that resolved, maybe Sean, maybe you can go offline and we'll then start with Jeremy. Oh, wait, sounded like you might be back. Try that again.
Can you hear me now?
No, still, thought we heard you for a minute there, but it seems like you're gone again.
Any luck? Is this working?
Oh, there we go.
All right. Well, sorry about that little
Keep
audio
talking.
hiccup there. Well, thanks again for the introduction, Steve, and sorry about that minor technical difficulty, everyone. Again, my name is Sean Murphy, part of the Berkeley lab. Today I'll be talking about the added value of time-sensitive energy efficiency evaluations. We're just about to publish a report on this topic. It's going to be talking about the importance of hourly energy efficiency savings and understanding the time-sensitive value, and also some insight into how the value of efficiency will change with an evolving grid. So first, I just want to start by asking the question, why does the timing of energy efficiency matter? It matters because energy efficiency is a resource that impacts the electricity grid. As a resource, it has a role in reducing peak demand and systems costs. In California, we have a very strong summer peaking electricity system, and that brings with it significant costs concentrated in just a few hours. Managing this demand is a big challenge and will continue to be so as the grid evolves with increasing levels of renewables and more electric vehicles. Energy efficiency also interacts with other distributed energy resources like demand response. So when energy efficiency reduces load, it also reduces demand for the need for demand response. So in order to know how much demand response you need, it's important to know when the energy efficiency savings are occurring. For grid operators, efficiency is just one of many resources at play in an evolving grid. So beyond just the interactions with demand response, efficiency at scale can affect longer-term decisions on resource planning. Knowing when savings occur is also important for knowing whether to invest in an efficiency program or a measure. Cost-benefit tests tend to guide these decisions, but since the cost of electricity varies over the day, the value that a measure provides depends on when those savings occur. Savings during a hot summer day are just very different from savings during a cool spring afternoon. So since we'll be talking about the time value of energy efficiency savings, I first just want to talk about how we approached estimating energy efficiency savings. So we assessed the savings for 18,000 space conditioning efficiency projects in California that were implemented between 2009 and 2017, all through Property Assessed Clean Energy, or PACE. These projects span much of the state and the jurisdictions of the three large investor-owned utilities in California, and they contain a number of space conditioning measures. 95% were either exclusively HVAC, windows and doors, or other envelope-related measures, or some combination of the three of them. So overall, you can just think of them as broadly space conditioning projects. Our unit of analysis was households. So all the savings that I'll talk about are changes in household electricity usage. They're not sub-metered device savings. The savings estimates are the difference between household usage before a project and after a project, controlled for weather variation. The approach we use is often referred to as normalized metered energy consumption methods, or NMEC, but just important thing to understand is that the goal is to remove the influence of atypically warm or cool years. So instead of estimating savings in a single year, we estimate them in a typical meteorological year, which you can think of as kind of a median year of historical weather. We use these energy savings and avoided costs to calculate the grid value of energy efficiency savings. We define the grid value as the product of electricity savings and the avoided costs, all in dollars to 2019. Avoided costs represent the cost the electricity system would face if usage reductions did not occur. The avoided costs are hour by year and vary by utility. We're all developed for the California Public Utilities Commission's avoided cost calculator. With the savings and avoided costs, we're able to compare grid value for two scenarios. One that reflects in the existing grid, in which gas turbines are the marginal resource. In this scenario, we use the 2019 avoided cost calculator, and another that reflects the future grid, in which battery storage is the marginal resource. Here we use the 2020 cost calculator. Next, we address the time sensitivity of the savings. So we compare grid value based on hourly savings with grid value based on annual savings. So now I want to take a look at how usage and electricity savings change over time across all of the space conditioning projects in our analysis. This figure represents pretty much all the projects in the analysis, so it's kind of like a space conditioning figure as opposed to showing a particular measure. On the top panel, we have the pre and post household usage in solid blue and the dashed orange. On the vertical axis is demand in a given hour, and the horizontal axis is hour of the day. And we break all these load shapes out by season, with non-summer, June through September on the left, and October through May, summer on the right. And these are load shapes. They represent the typical demand during an hour of the day in a given season. On the bottom panel, we have the difference between the pre and post project usage in the dashed green. These are saving shapes. Instead of usage, we have the demand reduction on the vertical axis, and the hour of day is still on the horizontal. A few important things stand out from this figure. First is that the savings are well aligned with system peak usage. So for the households in our data set, that was about 4 to 5 p.m. in the summer and 7 to 8 p.m. in the summer, so the household peak usage. And second, the peak demand savings in the summer are much higher than those in the non-summer. And third, a significant amount of savings remains after the peak period. The households continue to save electricity into the late evening. So next, we'll look at how the avoided costs vary over time, with gas turbines and battery storage as the marginal resource. So here we have on the horizontal axis the hour day again in a given season. And on the vertical axis, it's a little complicated, but it's the ratio of the average avoided cost in a given hour to the average avoided cost over the whole year. But you can think of each value as just representing how much more valuable savings are in that hour relative to the whole year. So it's sort of about how concentrated the avoided costs are in that hour. Basically, the higher the value, the greater the avoided costs are in that hour relative to the rest of the year. The shape of the avoided cost here is similar to load and savings. It's low in the day and high in the evening. And two important things stand out. First, it shows up how concentrated avoided costs are in the summer evenings. And second, these summer evenings are less costly relative to the rest of the year when we have storage as the marginal resource. You can see that on the right with the avoided costs in blue, the gas turbine as marginal resource, are much higher than those in orange in the early evening. So here we bring together the savings and the avoided costs. As I mentioned earlier, grid value is energy savings times the avoided costs. And this figure shows how the value created is distributed over the year. Again, we show non-summer on the top and then summer as well on the bottom. The vertical axis here is the share of annual grid value, and the horizontal axis is hour of the day. In the bottom panel, you can see that a significant share of grid value is concentrated in summer evenings. Between 4 and 8 in the summer, these projects provide nearly half of their value with gas turbines as the marginal resource. When battery storage is the marginal resource, those 4 hours are about a third of annual savings. Still significant, though a smaller amount. Clearly, the marginal resource has an impact on when these measures provide the most value, but clearly summer evenings are very important. So far, we've seen how electricity savings and the grid value they provide vary across the day and year. Visually, it's clear that there is more value in summer evenings and that the marginal resource affects grid value. But hourly savings and avoided costs are not always available, so it's important that we consider how different the evaluation of energy efficiency impacts are when we have hourly savings relative to when we just have annual estimates. This is the added value of time-sensitive efficiency valuations. In order to understand this added value, we compare two different versions of the grid value. First is the time-sensitive one. This is what I've been showing so far. It's basically multiplying savings and avoided costs in each hour and then adding them up. Next is what we refer to as the naive project grid value. And here we're multiplying annual electricity savings by the avoided costs. So we're sort of assuming that savings are evenly distributed across the year. The ratio of the time-sensitive project grid value to naive value is the value multiplier. It indicates how much more valuable projects are due to the timing of the savings. Should mention that others have used a similar metric. Some academics, Justin Boomhauer and Lucas Davis, used a similar thing called a value premium in a paper last year, basically showing a similar thing about the concentration of value efficiency savings. So for all the space conditioning measures combined, we find multipliers of 1.5 with the gas turbine and about 1.4 with battery storage as the marginal resource. That means hourly savings help account for 50% and 40% more value in those two scenarios. We find this added value for all of the measure categories individually, HVAC, windows and doors, and other envelope measures, which is just showing that when you're using the hourly savings, you're counting for far more value than you would with a simple annual savings number. I do want to provide a couple of caveats about how to interpret these multipliers. They're not ranking these measures, they're not indicators of absolute impact, and they're not representing cost effectiveness. They're just representing how much more value is accounted for when you use hourly savings in an efficiency valuation. So what can we take away from all of this? First, we can say that savings from electric space conditioning measures coincide well with California's electric system needs. Cooling replacements, windows and doors, envelope measures all deliver savings when system costs are high, most importantly during summer evenings. That means these measures can be an important resource for managing the grid. Because these savings occur when the grid needs it most, efficiency measures provide significant value. And we find that when we use hourly savings, we find 40 to 50% more value relative to an annual savings approach. Next, our results make a strong case for accurate estimates of peak demand savings for cost-effectiveness tests. When so much value is concentrated in just a few hours, it's just very important to know what the demand reductions are in those summer evenings. Hourly savings may not always be available, so in that case, accurate coincidence factors are going to be really important. Finally, an evolving grid affects the value of space conditioning efficiency measures, so savings still align well when we have battery storage as the marginal resource. Efficiency measures still generate significant value, but there are some changes in how much that value is and how it's distributed across the year. These results are about California, but the main theme here is the alignment of efficiency savings with peak system needs. In any jurisdiction with time-sensitive value or with a peaking system, I think you'd find similar results. But overall, I think it just illustrates the importance of the time-sensitive value of efficiency. To close, I just want to share some highlights on a publicly available tool that the Berkeley Lab has developed to estimate the time-sensitive value of efficiency. It will soon be released, and I provide the link in here so that folks will eventually find it. It's called the Time-Sensitive Value of Efficiency Calculator. So it estimates the value for up to 6 efficiency measures using hourly avoided costs for generation, transmission, distribution, greenhouse gas emissions, and avoided energy costs. And the tool applies these avoided costs to modeled saving shapes to estimate net present value and benefits by measure. It will soon be out and hopefully will be a way that people are going to be able to use the sort of techniques that I was showing throughout the beginning of the presentation and apply them to their jurisdictions. If anyone wants to follow up with questions, feel free to email me afterwards, although I hope you stay for our Q&A session. And I've also included a couple of links here in case people want to find any similar work or relevant other similar work that the Berkeley Lab has been doing. And with that, thank you.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Sean. That's really, cutting edge work, and really goes to show as we're able to measure, with the advent of AMI and the proliferation of AMI and the NMEC, M&B techniques or methodologies, how we're really able to start to hone in on the hourly value of energy efficiency and really the differential that different measures have and the different values that they have. So we have a couple of questions in the chat for Sean. Please keep those coming in. We'll address those, as we mentioned, at the end of the session. But for now, I'm going to introduce Jeremy Peterson with Xcel Energy. Jeremy's presentation is entitled Emerging Options and Challenges for Determining the Time Value of Energy Efficiency. As noted, Jeremy works with Xcel Energy as a SIP and DSM regulatory and technical consultant in the DSM Regulatory Strategy and Planning Department. His primary responsibilities include analyzing the cost effectiveness of demand-side management programs and portfolios in each of Xcel's 8 states, so that's quite a spread, and providing long-term forecasts of the expected impacts from these portfolios on Xcel Energy's electric and gas systems. This, I think, is fascinating work from a utilities perspective because, as we know, we're trying to value energy efficiency, and there's uses there in terms of the cost effectiveness tests and what measure mix it gets selected and what are the goals and how we're trying to reduce load. But here's an application at a utility where they're also, part of that feeds into the IRP, a big piece of that, right, as load modifiers. So how especially vertically integrated utilities like Xcel are thinking about this is really interesting and really important. So with that, Jeremy, the stage is yours.
Great, thank you, Steve. Thank you for that kind introduction too. Yeah. I'll cover some emerging options and challenges for determining the time value of energy efficiency. And this is most rated on the electric energy benefits and the electric system emissions benefits from energy efficiency. So the Xcel Energy, we have a broad territory that we serve. You can see in our budgets there that in Colorado and Minnesota, we have well over $100 million dedicated in 2021 for electric energy efficiency efforts. So we've got, we're a big player in this. And one thing I'd mention too is that our territories in Colorado and Minnesota are geographically benefited. We've got a lot of transmission access to wind energy, and there's a lot of wind energy here in the Midwest that's available. So as a result, we have a significant amount of wind energy on our system, and that does have impacts for evaluating the energy benefits and emissions impacts of energy efficiency. So first I'll talk about the methods that we've been using to date. Most common method we've been using is a dispatch model. So we've been using this in Colorado and Minnesota. It's currently what we use for our current energy efficiency plans, and we've been using it for years. So on this dispatch model, it comes up with hourly marginal energy costs and hourly systems emissions off the dispatch model based off a load forecast with energy efficiency in there. So we determine what our expected energy efficiency is into the future, put that into the load forecast, and the dispatch model optimizes the load to serve that, or optimum generation fleet to serve that load. And it's based off a static expansion plan as well. So off of our resource plans, we identify which build options we have in the future, and so we get a single expansion plan into the future that identifies what generation plants will be on the system each year. So the dispatch model combines all those things and it optimizes for price. So it produces a marginal energy cost data stream. And for the electric energy benefits, we take an hourly load shape for each energy efficiency technology and apply that to the marginal energy cost to get our value of electric energy benefits for every energy efficiency technology. Now for avoided emissions, because this dispatch model optimizes just for costs, it has trouble identifying what the marginal generation sources are. It has all these cost inputs from various sources, so it's really good at estimating the hourly marginal cost, but it isn't as good as estimating the hourly marginal emissions. So for emissions, the method we've been using is that we use an hourly system emissions to estimate what the emissions impact is by energy efficiency technology. And we take those load shapes and apply that to the hourly system emission to get our avoided emissions by technology. So this method has been working for us for quite a long time. It's been well accepted, but there are some significant drawbacks to it. The first one is because we have all of the future energy efficiency removed, the impacts of the future energy efficiency in the load forecast. This is just estimating the last kilowatt hour of energy efficiency avoided by EE. So we're at the bottom of the stack. We're after that last kWh saved by EE rather than all the kWh saved by EE. It also doesn't capture the time value of energy efficiency on our future generation asset build. It's a static expansion plan that we're optimizing off of. So we don't know, we're not able to measure the effects of what plants are built or not built as a result of energy efficiency. And then finally, because we don't have good hourly marginal emissions, we rely on hourly system emissions to determine the emissions impact. So we have used an alternate method as well. So this is a dispatch model where we have the band of energy avoided by energy efficiency included in there. So we've been using this actually in New Mexico, our portfolio in New Mexico, we've been using this for quite a long time. So in this method, we actually run 4 dispatches. So we do hourly marginal energy forecasts based off load forecasts with and without energy efficiency. So this allows us to look at that band of energy efficiency avoided. The load forecast with energy efficiency tends to produce lower costs than without energy efficiency, just because you're moving up farther on that generation stack. And then we also run it with and without carbon costs as well. So we'll either set a zero carbon cost and do the dispatch model, and the dispatch model will be revised somewhat because it doesn't make a preference of emissions, but when we throw in the carbon costs, it preference on emissions, and it produces a marginal cost stream, hourly stream, because of that carbon cost signal as well. So then to determine the energy benefits of this, we take the load forecast with and without energy efficiency and the resulting dispatch model from those, take every energy efficiency technology load shape and take the average of those results. So we're taking the top end of this band and the bottom end of this band, and we're assuming that the average of those 2 values represents the cost of the energy avoided by this band. And then for electric avoided emissions, we do the runs with and without carbon costs, and the value, the run with carbon cost is generally higher because it has that first generation plants with low carbon. So we run each energy efficiency technology load shape against those 2 runs, and the difference then is our carbon benefit in terms of dollars. So it doesn't get the emissions, the pounds of emissions, but it gets that value of carbon cost included. So drawback. So this solves that drawback of the dispatch model where it's the last kWh. So we do get the whole band of energy efficiency, or band of energy avoided by energy efficiency in the future, which we believe is more accurate than, but it still does not capture the time value of energy efficiency on the future generation asset build. So if this energy efficiency is avoiding certain types of plants being built in the future, that's not directly being captured in this method. And then we solved the emissions piece, so we're no longer reliant on the hourly systems emissions. We now have the marginal cost, the marginal carbon cost accounted for, and can evaluate energy efficiency measures off that. So there are some emerging methods that we're looking at as well. The one that's most promising for us is a proxy plant method. So this is an emerging method, but we actually did use this in Colorado in 2012 and 2013, and I'll go a little bit more into that. But so this method uses energy and emissions based off resource planning expansion plans. So the idea with this is that you run a resource planning model with a load forecast with energy efficiency and without energy efficiency, and you see what the resulting generation mix is. And here, the graphs here are just an illustrative example. This is a Minnesota early spring day. And you can see the generation mix with energy efficiency and the generation mix without energy efficiency differs somewhat. And again, this is 2030, so we've got 10 years worth of energy efficiency accumulated. So it does have some effect on that system load and what where your generation sources are. And if we look at this generation mix delta for energy efficiency, we can see by hour it's generally CTs and CCs. So the method here would suggest that rather than using the hourly dispatch model data, you should use either a CT or a CC and assume that all of the energy avoided by the energy efficiency in that year comes from those two sources. And you can do some matching up. You can do energy efficiency measures that correspond more directly with the operation characteristics of a CT, and assign that to a CT. And then those energy efficiency measures that have a lot more hours of use throughout the year could be applied to a CC. So you instead of doing an hourly evaluation, you just use these annual values for these plants that are avoided by energy efficiency. But this does capture the time value of energy efficiency, because in this resource planning modeling, the load forecast includes hourly load impacts from energy efficiency. So you do get your mix of energy efficiency in there. So the value, the time value of the energy efficiency is captured. And so now we've solved this drawback of not capturing the effect on the asset build. So this really captures the effect on the asset build. But now it doesn't differentiate between energy efficiency technologies. You can do this comparison of energy efficiency technologies that match up with the CT operation, with the CC operation, but even within those classes, those load shapes may be significantly different for energy efficiency technologies. So that's a drawback of this method. So I want to talk a little bit about beneficial electrification. So like I mentioned before, NSP territory in Colorado, or Excel territory in Colorado and Minnesota, has a lot of wind generation on our system. And so that really suggests that beneficial electrification can be implemented in Colorado and Minnesota, mainly because the beneficial electrification that we're looking at, which is supplementary heating from heat pumps and water heating from heat pumps, correspond fairly well with those non-dispatchable wind resource that we're putting on the system. So this method, this proxy plant method, may be the most effective method for capturing the impacts of beneficial electrification. And again, here's the illustrative example for 2030 Minnesota Early Spring Day, and you can see the mix without BE and then the mix with BE, and you can see the generation mix delta. And the result here is there's some deltas in CTs and CCs, but there's a huge change in wind. So this suggests that wind energy is actually built to serve this beneficial electrification load. And you can see even when this goes negative, these are hours at which wind is displacing some load from CTs and CCs. So this is a strong indication that the energy for beneficial electrification comes from wind with a little bit of CT and CC. And that may differ significantly from the dispatch model, which may be dominated by CT and CC as the hourly marginal resource. So to calculate then the energy benefits, or in this case for electrification, the energy costs and added emissions, again, you have an annual value based off the generation assets that are avoided or added to serve that load. So again, this captures the change in the asset build, but does not differentiate between electrification technologies. So to sum up, final comments. So the dispatch model we found has been appropriate in the past, but it's been most appropriate when we have generation portfolios dominated by dispatchable plants. So a dispatch model works really well in estimating, the operation of those dispatchable plants. Now that we've got a lot of non-dispatchable generation options, this may argue for using resource planning modeling to determine the time value of energy efficiency, because there's this impact on generation build in the future. So both of these methods do have drawbacks. So what we may suggest is that a mix of both this dispatch model and resource planning may be the method that most accurately determines the time value of energy efficiency, both in terms of energy costs and emissions. And again, the timing of electrification impacts, because of it lines up so well with a lot of the renewable generation. That may have a large impact on generation build as well, and may show results of resource planning that differ significantly from the dispatch model. So that is all I have. I will hand it off to Steve.
Great. Thanks very much, Jeremy. That was really good stuff, really interesting. We run a lot of dispatch models ourselves, both production cost models or hourly models, as well as resource planning models that look at market entry and exit, and combining those two, as you suggested, to get the most accurate way of trying to determine avoided builds, right? Avoided capacity, getting the market entry and exit right, if you will, and then determining the marginal impacts of that in terms of avoided costs and avoided emissions does really seem to be the right way to go. And it's fascinating to hear about how Excel is doing that. Okay, well, last but certainly not least, we'll hear from Abigail Dakin, who's a product manager with the Energy Star HVAC program at the US EPA. And Abby will talk to us about adding load flexibility value with Energy Star Connected. We've been talking a lot about the system, which is important to understand, because that's where some of the big resource decisions are made, and some of the big impacts are seen, avoided costs, avoided emissions. But let's not forget about the consumer side in this, and how flexible load management, how energy efficiency, how does the consumer going to interact with all this? And so I think that's where Abby's presentation is really rounds out this panel nicely, because Energy Star, as we know, is really the star brand for getting consumer trust in energy efficiency appliances and setting the standards. And now they've moved into, as Abby will explain, looking at sort of the hourly impact of those energy efficiency measures. So Abby has led the development of EPA's innovative connected thermostat specification, which recognizes products that save energy based on how they are used in the homes of actual subscribers. She also manages the requirements for Energy Star heating, cooling, and water heating products, and the grid responsiveness elements of all Energy Star specifications. Before joining EPA in 2010, she's had a number of jobs in research physics and sustainability, and holds a BS and MA degrees in physics and a Master's of Engineering in Public Policy. So Abby, with that, please talk to us about Energy Star.
Thanks, Steve. Glad to be here. So as Steve said, we're going to pivot a little bit, and instead of talking about the value of energy, the hourly value of energy efficiency, now we're going to be talking about what if you could add load flexibility so that your energy efficient appliance not only provides peak coincident energy efficiency, but also provides the ability to change when it's using load. So you all know Energy Star. In addition to products, we also label buildings, plants, and new homes. And we've been doing that, it says more than 25 years, but this is actually our 30th anniversary in 2021. Connected in our specs are optional criteria that leverage the same platform that people rely on for energy efficiency, the Energy Star brand. And the criteria, the connected criteria, provide consistent starter functionality. You know, we're in early days yet. This is not the be all and end all here. Emphasizing open standards, low standby power, and test methods for DR functionality, and thus operating as a trusted resource for this as well as for energy efficiency. It is fair to ask, why is this part of Energy Star? And really, it's two trends. The first trend you've just been hearing a tremendous amount about with energy efficiency still playing a strong and critical role, but with generation becoming less dispatchable, the importance of insight into and control of loads is rising. In addition to that, consumers are asking for products that are connected. You know, the smart products are becoming more popular with consumers, which gives both an opportunity and a problem of growing standby loads. So depending on which kind of technology we're talking about, which kinds of products, the benefits and the potential issues are different. And in this case, the way we deal with it are different. So for the large loads, that's the ones on the left in this chart, those are the ones that are going to provide the most grid value. And coincidentally, mostly they're ones that consumers don't care a tremendous amount about their connectivity. Water heaters, great example. Energy storage device, not really exciting for consumers. On the other hand, you have on the other side light bulbs and connected door locks and things that consumers are adopting anyway. And there we're really just trying to bring energy savings along for the ride. Looking at standby power, looking at making sure that these products can connect to a home energy management system as much as possible, and thus provide in aggregate some load flexibility benefit. So this has led us to, in addition to adding connected functionality to a bunch of specifications that we already had for energy efficiency, that has also led us to develop an Energy Star Smart Home Energy Management System specification. The specification was finalized at the end of 2019, and we expect our first certified products, which are really systems, pretty shortly now. So when you hear Smart Home Energy Management System, I want you to be imagining that you're really talking about a smart home system that a consumer would adopt for any other reason, that has some energy functionality along with it, some energy management functionality. And that's aligned with what Energy Star does for every product category. You're buying a light bulb to provide light. You buy an Energy Star light bulb to get some energy efficiency with it. And that's what we're trying to do with these smart home systems. This the thing we're actually certifying is a combination of a service, that's that brain in the middle there, and a minimum set of products and the ability to connect to more. So the certification is not tied to a single device. It's tied to a system and to the algorithms that system uses. And in this case, we're really looking at algorithms that extend the power of unoccupied states in the home to save energy. There's the automated energy saving actions. Okay. Meanwhile, for all of these specs, interoperability is really key for energy savings. It's different for different stakeholders, but interoperability is important for everyone. Obviously, for utilities, the easier it is to set up, having a lot of load moving with them, obviously important. For manufacturers, of course, they don't want to do a new solution for every utility program. And then for consumers, interoperability is important because it's closely related to consumer choice. Plus, it means that their smart home system has more stuff connected to it. So we have some criteria to encourage interoperability in our specification. To a large, entire SHEM specification is about interoperability plus this of away states. But in addition to that, we participate in standards bodies and pay attention to what's happening with interoperability as part of our work. So because we're talking about valuation, let me just talk about valuation for a second. And I just want to say that my specialty is setting up the criteria. Valuation is not my specialty. Some of my colleagues work on this. But I'll just give you a little bit of an overview. So at EPA, for the Energy Star program, we think of value in two ways. We look at consumer value that comes from utility bill savings. And the flexibility would show up there if consumers reliably paid less for their energy if they had flexible devices, products that provided load flexibility. So for instance, if they're on a time of use rate, and it can be shown that a smart home energy management system, or SHEMS, reduces their actual energy cost, that's something we could, if it became widespread enough, take into account. Obviously, that's a world that we aren't at yet. We also look at the value of the Energy Star program. That's in terms of energy and cost savings, but primarily in terms of avoided emissions. And right now, the way we do that is we look at bulk energy savings, not demand savings, per avoided, and then we relate that to a nationally averaged emissions intensity for each fuel mix. Now, obviously, emissions intensity, that's a marginal emission factor that we use. I think that some of the new, it's a short-term marginal, and some of these new methods that my co-presenters have talked about today are going to be very important to us in entering this new world where the primary benefit of energy efficiency is reducing the cost of system build-out for a carbon-free energy system and increasing reliability and reducing the need for the emissions associated with building new plants. For load flexibility in particular, because it can, combined with energy storage as it is naturally in a water heater or a electric vehicle charger, it can also increase how much of the energy available from a non-dispatchable renewable resource is actually able to be used. And so we are not at a point to assign emissions benefits to that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done that I'm sure many of you and my co-presenters will be working on in the coming years. And we look forward to cooperating with that and incorporating it into the way we think about the value of the Energy Star program as time goes on. And that's all I've got.
That's terrific. Thank you, Abby. Really interesting stuff that EPA and Energy Star are doing to set some of these standards and some of the criteria around interoperability, and then thinking forward to actually being able to value some of the benefits, avoided emissions, most notably from the hourly impacts that energy efficiency will have. So we'll now take a few questions from the audience. If you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A bar to the right. We've got a few minutes here, so let me start with a couple of the questions that we have. So this was for our, and if I could ask, our presenters to come back online. So for Sean, there was a question regarding the analysis that you presented. Has that analysis been run in a pre-high renewable system? So, looking at California now, where you've got an abundance, some might even say an overabundance of solar currently during the day. Did you run this analysis, in a pre-duck curve world?
That's a good question. So we only ran it on California because we had these publicly available avoided costs, which we were focusing on. Also, the project data that we had was also in California, so we weren't looking for avoided costs in other states, though they may exist. I think despite that, California has a significant amount of renewables, which can affect, especially with all the solar, midday energy prices. There's still a significant evening peak that the gas turbines are meeting. So I think all the results and the impact of the efficiency measures exists regardless of what was happening sort of in the middle of the day. But I think it would be interesting to conduct the analysis on other jurisdictions. So I think that we'd find similar results in terms of that time sensitivity when there is a strong peak in the evening, or really whenever there's a strong peak.
Great. And there was a question that was answered within the chat. Looks like there was a question regarding whether the online tool also focuses on the California grid, or can you modify location? And there was a response there saying that it can use any data from any location, but again, you need that default avoided cost data is the challenge. You had, so the value multipliers that you spoke about, Sean, and I'd be interested in Jeremy, your reaction to this as well, as long as you can say something that doesn't get you in trouble with your regulators. But it's a question of, so you mentioned that the value multipliers, which I thought was a really interesting concept, and you said it's about, I wrote it down, 1.37 for batteries and higher for gas turbines, over 1.5. So there was a question right now from the audience asking, do you think those ratios would be lower in a world of lesser renewables? So that's question number one. And while you're thinking about that, I guess I would ask, how does one take that into account in the world of, where energy efficiency measures are currently being evaluated typically through typical cost effectiveness tests, right? California Standard Practice Manual, with whether it's a TRC or a variety of tests, the consumer test, and now there's national standards practice manuals. So things are evolving, but they're more or less the same in terms of the evaluation criteria. How do you take these multipliers into account, or is that the framework in which you take the multipliers into account? How are they actually applied when looking at sort of within a regulatory construct, and you're trying to, as a utility, justify effectively, a portfolio of energy efficiency measures? How does one use those multipliers? I'll stop there, but I have a bunch of follow-on questions.
Sure, that's a good question. I think the role of the multiplier is partly an illustration of the time-sensitive value of efficiency, as opposed to sort of serving as sort of a metric of like for regulatory performance, or it's not meant to substitute for cost effectiveness. We're only looking at the grid costs, so it's not taking into consider sort of the customer side benefits as well. So it's sort of a partial analysis anyways of the impacts of energy efficiency. So the main goal is just to be able to demonstrate when you consider the hours, or when efficiency savings occur, the additional value that you're able to capture or recognize, because it's it exists regardless of how you're measuring it. It's just if you have the hourly data and are able to use that in your evaluation or in your cost effectiveness analysis, you're going to be able to account for more value if you just had a sort of simple annual measurement. So I think the implications for utilities and regulators is that the hourly savings are really important to have, and if you're able to estimate those, so if you have data on metering this AMI data on these households, it's possible to develop these saving shapes at scale and understand the demand impacts and relate those to avoided costs, and even apply them into I think your modeled saving shapes sometimes can be used in resource planning, so it would be possible to use empirical ones as well. Maybe connect into the sort of work that Jeremy does.
Great.
And I may not have answered that. There was, just to quickly address that first question, it's a little hard to say exactly how the multipliers would be different with a different sort of generation profile. But one thing I should say is that those multipliers that Steve was just referencing, and the ones I mentioned in the paper, in the presentation, were for like the aggregate of the projects we were analyzing. So it sort of reflects a measure mix of base program, and that depending on whether you're looking at a cooling replacement or envelope, it's going to be sensitive to sort of, it depends when the savings matter as well. So you need to be focusing on also not just what the costs are, but also what measures you're looking at.
Sure. And actually, one quick follow-on to that, and then Jeremy, I'd like to turn to your thoughts about that. But when you talked about batteries versus turbines, right, I'm assuming that you're thinking of sort of, transmission connected batteries, really at the wholesale level, not so much distributed. And I'm assuming that matters just because of the cost. Is that a fair assumption?
I'd have to look into I don't recall exactly from the avoided cost calculator documentation how they imagine them playing in, but I think it's a model. They're assuming some level of costs, and it doesn't reflect exactly what's happening in California right now. It's more of what may be anticipated to happen.
Got it. Okay. Great. Jeremy, just curious on your thoughts is from Excel. Has that concept of that multiplier been introduced at all? Or I mean, I haven't thought of it in those terms before, so I thought it was really kind of fascinating. Any sort of reaction from your side?
Yeah, so we have used non-energy benefits multipliers in Colorado in what's called a modified TRC test that includes these non-energy benefits adder. They've been in use for about 10 plus years or so. And initially they were based off some value of, some quantification of benefits that are not included, the customer benefits that aren't included in the test. But they've kind of morphed into kind of a policy tool, a throttle, and identifying what's cost effective or not. And there's a higher value for low income, which was agreed to by all the parties, but it's not really based off the data now, an estimate of the benefits, but more as a throttle for this is the adder that's necessary to get this level of achievement cost effective. And I think that method where now the goals tend to be carbon goals rather than cost effectiveness goals, and the policy may be the most cost effective path to reaching the carbon goals. I think a method of an NNB adder or some multiplier like that may be used to identify that most cost effective path.
Okay, good. So we're about out of time in our main session. I would like to thank the speakers for your presentations and the attendees for your participation and attending. Again, if you'd like to join us to continue this conversation, and I think there is a good conversation to be had here, please join us on the Zoom chat. I see they just put up the link. So with that, we're gonna drop off of this session and take a few minutes and reconvene on the Zoom session. So thanks everybody. Thanks very much, everybody, and special thanks to our speakers, and we'll talk to you all soon.